So today we continue with chapter 5, arrays. Now we'll talk about two-dimensional arrays, not about the multi-dimensional arrays, which are three-dimensional, four-dimensional, and much more. We will only talk about two-dimensional arrays. Now, let's say that in C, a two-dimensional arrays are arrays of arrays. For example, if we say that we have an array of four rows and two columns, in the reality, we have an array of four elements, and each element of those four elements points to another array of two elements. So arrays of two dimensions are arrays of arrays. But for simplicity, and because this video is for beginners, we will look to the two-dimensional array as a table of rows and columns. The first dimension in any array of two dimensions is the number of rows. The second dimension in an array of two dimensions is the number of columns. In this case, we have an array named A and of type integer. That means this array will hold only integers, and we have four rows and two columns. We have a table of four rows and two columns. To declare, so this is the declaration of an array in memory. And the declaration and initialization at the same time, we can declare the array, the size, the number of rows that we want, and the number of columns. In this case, four rows and two columns. So in the first row, we will be filled by the values enclosed between those two curly brackets. Number one will be filled in the first cell, number two in the second cell of the first row, of course. The second set of integers will be filled in the second row. Number 6 will be the first element in the second row, and number 3 will be the second element in the second row. 2 and minus 10 are the set in the third row, and 9 and 5 the set in the last row. So number 1, this value, which is 1, is the element in cell A00. So the row is 0 and the column is 0. And then, for example, another example, 2 is the value in the cell number 01, which means the row 0 and the column 1. The cell 5, the value 5, is in the cell A of 3, 1, which means the cell in the row number 3 and the column number 1. Note that we have 4 rows. The first row is numbered 0, sorry. The first row number is 0. The second is 2, 0, 1, 2, 3. And since we have two columns, the first column name is 0 and the second column is 1. Numbering the rows and columns always start by 0. Now, how to fill an array, the cells of an array. We can fill the array values by a formula. For example, if we want to fill the values, the cells of this array by the product of the indexes, which is I times j. So we need to make two loops. Why we need two loops? The first loop is for rows, for the number of rows, of 4 rows. So if you have 4 rows, we start this loop by 0. It will end when I equals 3. When I becomes 4, this loop will not work anymore, because we have 4 rows the first row number is 0, the last row number is 3. The second loop, so the second loop is for the number of columns, is for columns. Now here we have two columns. The first column number is 0, the second column number is 1. This is why j goes from 0 to 1. When j becomes equal to, the loop stops. At each element, at each iteration of this loop, we will fill the array cell. For example, for the first time, I equals 0 and j equals 0. So we are filling this cell by I times j. Since I equals 0 and j equals 0, I times j will remain 0. So this cell will hold 0. J becomes 1, but I still 0 because we are still on the on the row number 0. So 0 times 1 still 0. The next iteration, I becomes equal 1. That means we are on the second row. We are on the second row. And again, in the first column, j equals 0. So a of ij, a of 1, 0, equal I times j equal 1 times 0, which is 0. So here we put a 0. J plus plus, j becomes 1. 1 times 1, 1. This is why this cell will hold 1, the value 1. And like that until those two loops finish execution. We can also fill the array cells by the keyboard. From the user can enter values from the keyboard and the array will be filled. Of course, we need the same loops, the first four for rows and the second four for the number of columns. Because we need to enter the values from the keyboard, this is why we need to use a function that accepts values from the keyboard. In this case, we will use the scanf. The scanf rule, it needs a format specifier which can, according to the value which we are entering. In this case, a of ij is an integer, and the format specifier for integers is %d. Another way to fill the array, also from the keyboard, but in this case, the program wants to control the input values from the keyboard. For example, the user is allowed to enter values greater than 100. Greater than 100. That means if the user enters a value less than 100, this value will not be acceptable, and the loop and the user must enter the value again. How can we do this? We need to use a do-while loop. So the scanf will be enclosed, will be inside this loop. Each time a user enter a value, for example, let's say the user entered the value 90. 90 is less than or equal 100? Yes. In this case, this do while will run again in the next iteration. So when the user enters, for example, 110, 110 is less than 100? Of course, no. So in this case, j will go to the next value. That means we will go to the next cell in the same row. This is only an example. The condition here maybe can be or could be any condition other than this one. For example, You can say that the user is allowed to enter value, is only allowed to enter values, is only allowed to enter values, to enter, for example, even values, or to enter values between 10 and 100. So you need to know how to write the condition which is the inverse of the condition needed in the question or written in the question. Now, how to display the array cells values on the screen. Again, we need two loops because we are going to move on the number of rows. Then at each row, we need to move on the columns of this row. Now, we want to print or display the values on the screen, but each row in a line. So we print the values of cells in a row, then we make a new line like that. If the array contains those values, the output will be like that. This is the first row, this is the second, the third, and the fourth row. Now, in case you want to display the values of the array A separated by tabs, tabs means that we need to use the \t inside the printf, of course. \t is the character which will print a tab like that. So two loops, one for the rows, another for the columns, and a printf function to display the values separated by tabs. All the values will be displayed on one single line. Now, making some manipulations. We need to make some computations in the arrays we have created and filled. Now, for example, example 1, compute and display the summation of even values in array A. We need a variable. I will name this variable sum. Sum equals 0. Why? Because maybe we will not find any value that satisfies the condition, which is even. Maybe there's no even values in the array. In this case, the summation will remain equal 0. In case there are any values, any even values, this condition will be satisfied, will be true. So in this case, the summation, we will add in the summation the value existing inside this memory location or this element of the array, A of I. When these two loops ends execution, we will display on the screen the result of calculation, which is the value inside the variable sum. Another example, how to find and display the highest value in array A. Highest means the maximum value in the array. In this case, we suppose the first value in the array is the maximum or the highest. This is why highest will hold the first value, the value that is held by the first cell in the array. The first cell in the array is the array of index 0, 0, as you can see. Then we must go through the array and through its rows and columns, and at each element we need to test this element. If it is greater than highest, then the highest will not stay as it is. We must change it and make this value become the highest. This is why highest equal A of ij. When this loops ends execution, we display the result, which is the highest value. The third example, count the values of A that are divisible by 3. In this example, also we need a new variable, which is named here count. Count is equal 0. Also, we must know that in case we will not find any number in the array that is divisible by 3. In this case, the count will remains equal 0. In case we find any number which its modulus on over 3 is equal to 0, we count these values. That means the counter will be incremented by 1. So count plus plus means count equal count plus 1. Also at the end, we must print or display the result we have found. Now, this example is the same example. Now here we have an array of 4 rows and 2 columns. We will fill the array by values entered from the keyboard, as we said. The values must be greater than 100. If not, we will display a message on the screen. You enter an acceptable value. The user can try again. Then we will compute the summation of even values, and we will find the highest value. Then we will count the values of A that are divisible by 3. At the end, we can also display the values of A, each row in one line, we will copy the code from our file because we have it here. So this is the code, each row in one line. And now we'll execute this code, this program, save, then compile and run. Enter integer values greater than 100. This message is displayed because we asked the program in the first or in line 7. We said, we insert the statement printf enter integer. So we are asking the program to display this message. Enter integer values greater than 100. I would suppose I didn't understand this message and I will enter 90. 90 is not greater than 100, which is not an acceptable value. In this case, the system displayed you another message. You entered an unacceptable value. Try again. Why? Because in this loop, we entered 90. So 90 is the first element we entered in the array. A of 0, 0 is 90. 90 is less than or equal 100, of course, true. So this print statement will execute. You entered an unacceptable value, try again. So now we are stuck in this loop, in this do while. Again, I will enter, for example, 50. 50 also is less than or equal 100, so it's not acceptable. We will try again. Even 100 also is not acceptable because 100 is less than or equal 100. And now I will enter, for example, 200. 200 is an acceptable value. This is why the system is not anymore stuck in this loop, and J is incremented by 1, and now we are in the next cell. So the first cell holds the number the integer 200. The next cell, for example, let's say 300. In the next cell of the first row, we are in the first row. Now we are in the second row. Second row, I will enter the value 220 and 320. Now in the fourth row, 400, 500. Then 420, 530. Now the summation of all these values with the 200 is 2890. We should make a new line here. The highest value in array. Let's do it now. So here we have, before displaying this message, let's make a new line. And also before displaying the next message, we will make a new line before and after, because after we will display these values. So let's continue with the execution. The output, the highest value in array A is 530. 530 is true. The count equal 2. Count equal 2. Because we didn't make a new line here. This is the first row. Now I will make another execution because I inserted the new line operators. Let's execute again. Now, for example, 10, 20. Oh, 10, 20, not acceptable. 110, 120. Now, for example, 30 also is not acceptable. So we will try again. For example, 200, 201. 300, for example, 303, 220, 500. Okay, finished. The summation is 1450. Summation of 110 with 120. 30 is not an acceptable value. 200 is acceptable in those values. The highest value in array A is 500. It's true, it's 500. The count equal 4. What were we counting? Just to remember, we are counting the values which are divisible by 3. So 200 is not divisible by 3. 120 is divisible by 3. 110 is not. 201 is divisible by 3. 300 is divisible by 3. 303 also is divisible by 3. And 220 is not, 500 is not. This is why count equal 4. It's true. Then here we are displaying the value of each row in one line. We have 4 rows, and each row have 2 columns, like that. See you in the next lecture.